Hello, and we're back. And yes, in this episode, the WHOTASTIC panel are about to go back to 1999 to investigate and look at the TV movie. But are they dressed for the occasion? Hello. And it's all systems go. Hello to the WHOTASTIC panel here for the TV movie review.
Hello.
How are we all? Thank you very much. Here we are. Now, listen, I want to start this particular show by saying a huge thank you to the Thin King for this illustration that he has sent us. He heard that we were going to be looking at the TV movie this week, and he has sent us this gorgeous illustration of the 8th Doctor with a little bit of the 7th and a little bit of the Master in there as well. Beautiful. And I was just so... I don't know. I just thought, yeah, we're going to put it in the show.
Very moody.
Yeah,
it is pretty cool, isn't it?
He's caught Paul McGann's eyes wonderfully.
Yeah,
really beautiful.
So anyway, thank you, Thinking. We appreciate that, and it was nice to chat with you in the week as well. Thank you so much for that. So here we are. We are looking at on the reviews today the TV movie. So 7 years without the Doctor. January 1996, bang. We are told the Doctor's back, Doctor Who's coming back. I remember where I was that January Monday morning when I saw it in the paper and had to double take thinking, oh, there we go again. I had to read it continually until I actually realized, actually, this is the real thing. Who else remembers that day in 1996?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Complete shock because there was nothing into that. No internet in those days. No social media to get us all worked up about things prior to the event. It just came out of the blue. And not only did we find that Doctor Who was coming back after years of speculation about it might be coming back, it was coming back. Paul McGann was going to be the Doctor, and they were already filming the thing. So it was only a few months to transmission. So it was a bit like a sugar rush, getting everything all at once. It was one of those moments in Doctor Who history where you're right, JT, you can remember where you were, who you were with when you got that news, because it was the news we'd all been waiting for 7 long years.
And looking at the picture,
I remember the fantastic.
Sorry, and look at we were all keen, you see, Paul. When you look at we're keen. When you look at the picture of Paul McGann then, and you know, it was a family of renown, good caliber acting. He'd just been on BBC's The Monocled Mutineer in a starring role, and you know, I have to say, as a Doctor Who fan, you take the you know, some of the jetsam and flotsam of, you know, choices of actor and all the rest of it, but you think, whoa, this is serious. This is, you know, this is somebody of real caliber and acting. Strong caliber and pedigree, and so that excited me. And of course, they still maintained the British content because, of course, you know, you didn't know where it was going to go with the funding.
Well, I want to come back to that a bit later, actually, because I'll debate that. Okay, yeah.
I was going to say what I remember at the time in terms of publicity was that fantastic image of Paul McGann with the crystal at Longleat exhibition, which was outside the TARDIS. It was a great shot, fantastic stuff.
Yeah. And that was all done in secret as well, considering how many fans have been around. I mean, you know, to go to the Longleat exhibition, but nobody saw that. Nobody seemed to. I mean, wow.
Longleat was closed at that point. It was the off season.
Our exhibitions expert reporting there, Badouia. If you haven't read this book, it's available.
I remember the exact date, but it was done in secret for that reason.
Oh, really?
It's probably why they went to Longleat.
Oh.
And it was different as well because, of course, it wasn't the usual press call. It was official BBC photographers and all this that were taking the pictures, posing them all, and then they were distributed to the press. So they all ran the similar photographs, didn't they? And then the Doctor Who Monthly was given, Doctor Who magazine at that point were given the same photographs as well. I mean, it was a different way of doing things back in 1996, wasn't it? And it was just a period where we were all thought to ourselves, right, hang on a sec, this is actually happening. Let's say hello to people that are with us in the chat. It's lovely to see you. It's as though we've never ever been away. Peter Harrington is here. Jamie Reese is here. We've got, who else have we got here? We've got Just Jordan here as well. Time to make a cuppa. Reference, of course, to how we met the Doctor in this episode. Wonderful, very nice. So hello, and hello to everybody else. Listen, this is our review show. Please give us your comments about the TV movie. We want to know what you think, as well as just us here on the WHOTASTIC panel. We want to know what you think. What are your recollections? If you've watched it recently, if you're new to the show, if you've just seen it, let us know. Let us know what you think. Jamie's also saying that, well, Peter was saying he remembers McGann with the short hair in Doctor Who magazine. Absolutely. And then Jamie's saying he's quite short in stature too. But yeah, I mean, Brendan, you're right. I mean, the whole thing about the McGanns is they were famous. And, you know, they were the then modern acting equivalent of One Direction years later, because everybody knew them and they were very, very famous. You know, they were going around. But for us as fans, this was big. And what happened, of course, January 1996, we got the word Doctor Who's coming back, stars Paul McGann. And then it was a whirlwind, because what happened in a very short space of time, the show then arrived with us, the film then arrived with us in May. And it was a big deal because the Radio Times picked up on whatever it could here to report what was going on in Doctor Who. So we had various covers coming from the Radio Times here. Now, this is one of them. The X-Files was huge at this point, wasn't it, guys? It was the X-Files, massive ratings.
Yeah, massive,
it was
massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what they were going to do inevitably was tag Doctor Who on to that to try and remind the audience that Doctor Who was actually around, was coming back, and just to remind them it had been there before, and they might like it. They might like it. So they did that. Then we got this sort of piece here. Who is McGann this time? There you can see him as the Monocle Mutineer, as well as some of his other roles there, and again the Longleat console there from the exhibition. And then as they went up to the date, we got things like this. Now, this feature, guys, that was one of the first photographs I've seen of McGann in costume, and that's when I thought, actually, he looks good. And wasn't that costume, everybody, a real shocker after some of the stuff we've been getting? Yeah, okay, you know what I'm saying?
It was a brilliant costume. Very, very echoes of William Hartnell, which were fabulous.
I think that's what the point was, wasn't it? It was supposed to echo the first Doctor.
Well, Paul McGann had said he did like Pertwee and he did like Hartnell, and it was just interesting that they've harked back to that, and so he was very comfortable with that as a choice. It is very interesting how they went back and they got rid of the question marks. I mean, Sylvester McCoy made a point about his costume later, that they toned it down, Americanized it slightly, but he was very comfortable with it. But they took away, I think, the elements that some of us were a little bit dubious about, and they took those away. And so you knew there was serious intent involved here.
Oh, absolutely. And also, when we go back to that piece in the Radio Times, this is when I knew they were spending money. Because as you can see there, this was accomplished writer for the Radio Times at the time, Alison Graham. And she got to go over there and get these pictures and write and meet people that were on the set and the producers, etc. And this was the first glimpse of the TARDIS. And for me, I was thinking, that's the TARDIS? Good grief. Look, this thing's got money. Yeah, and it was a bit of a shock, I have to say.
and that was one of the main shocks about the movie and the build-up to it, was that this was probably the first time we could see what Doctor Who would look like when money had been spent on it, because Doctor Who would always go by in a wing and a prayer up until this point. You know, it was never properly funded as a science fiction show by the BBC. So this was the first time we were going to see Doctor Who with effects of the time, probably one of the sets, and, if you like, star name actors. Whether or not that produces the goods is a matter for debate.
We shall come to, I am sure, John, we will come to. The Radio Times coverage went right up to the day. They were doing everything they could, because obviously at that point, Radio Times was owned by BBC Studios, which was then called BBC Worldwide. I hope you're keeping up. And they had, of course, invested part of, look at Badweir there with his props. Look at him acting now. Yes, he's up for an Oscar.
He's like dictionary.
You should be wearing white gloves with that, Badweir. White gloves.
Is he sitting on the loo?
On the way. Yes, John.
Is he sitting on the loo?
No, he's not. Oh gosh, we're having too much fun. But look, what happened because they really pushed this out, and for the first time since 1983, Doctor Who got onto the cover of the Radio Times with this now famous, beautiful picture of McGann looking up at the viewer there. And not only that, it had this little pull-out souvenir book inside, which included a sort of resume of the previous 7 incarnations and some of the monsters, and a look at the show and what have you. And also, it got this an incredible look at the Doctor and his companion and the Master, and an article about it. I mean, they went hell for leather. And for the first time ever in the show's history, it also got coverage across the globe, but mainly, of course, from Fox in America. So they were pushing it with these adverts in the various publications in TV Guide and what have you. And it also got a TV Guide cover and a feature in TV Guide, which I would have shown you, but I've seemed to have misplaced the copy I was sent all those years ago.
And this is where you got the first schism between the different funding going on, because of course the BBC really went for it. Unlike in the late 80s when it was up against Coronation Street and various other big beasts on ITV, good scheduling, bank holiday. The British public are at home, sitting ducks in those days because we were before streaming. And so really clever, good scheduling for Doctor Who for once. However, it wasn't the same issue in America, where it was Roseanne's finale where her husband had a heart attack. And so, of course, I mean, I think you can mention the ratings, can't you? But it was a success in Britain. It was less so in America.
It was a huge success here. It was shown, as you can see from the scroll below, on
it
BBC
did quite
One.
well on the ratings, didn't it, JT?
It did, yeah. The 27th of May, 1996, and it got 9.87 million viewers here in the United Kingdom, which was a huge amount. That was a great. I mean, it just showed the BBC there was still a market, not just from the cult diehards like all of us, but the public as well, because they tuned in that night. In America, on the Fox network, yes, it got 5.6 million viewers, and 9% share, and was therefore deemed not successful. Let's have a look at some of the comments we've got here. Jamie says he made his parents drive him back home from a shopping centre so he could see Doctor Who, the movie. Just Jordan, hello there. I was 6, and aside from the repeats, I watched with my dad. This is probably one of my earliest memories of Doctor Who. You were 6 in 1996. That really makes me feel...
we were talking about this. We'd be really interested in your views of this as a little kid, because we obviously were coming to it as adults. So please tell us more as we go through the program.
Absolutely. And one thing that we do want to know, Just Jordan, as well, is did it capture you? Did you continue after this one-off TV movie? Did you stay with the show all that time to come back to it in 2000? Let us know. Peter Harrington is...
How did you know?
My neighbour again here, just briefly to go, before we move off Radio Times and things like that, because the anticipation on this side of the Atlantic was that this was going to be big, because for the first time ever, Radio Times was running a weekly Doctor Who comic strip, and it started at this time too.
It did, yeah.
And it went on for quite some time after the TV movie, because the expectation was that
there'd be a series.
It could be big time. So I remember.
I think it was so big. I think it was on the TV Times as well as the Radio Times.
Yes, I've got that cover around. Actually, carry on talking.
I think it was 4 or 5 little pictures a week you got. I remember the Ice Warriors being in it at some point, but that was good fun too.
I did have the TV Times cover. I seem to have lost it, but sorry about that. But yeah, it was the first time that Doctor Who was entering a new phase, if you like, on British television. In the old days before this, the Radio Times was only allowed to cover BBC shows. The ITV version, the TV Times, was only allowed to cover the independent shows. When Doctor Who came back in 96, it was a free-for-all. So Doctor Who got covered by TV Times, Satellite Week, and all the other things, Inside Guide, and there were so many different things back then, just as there are now. Pete said he has that magazine. It was fabulous. Thank you, Pete, for joining us. And there was another comment here that was really good. Oh, hello. I want to say hi to Ben. He's made it to the live stream. Welcome, Ben. It's absolutely fantastic to see you. Thank you for joining us here on Who's Views Reviews. Let us know what you think of the show. Actually, don't. Let us know what you think of the TV movie. We've also got the Meddling Funk. He's arrived with us as well. Thank you, Meddling Funk, for being here with us. You are a star. In fact, you're all star Who viewers. We love you. We love you. We love you. So let's get on to actually looking at this, because, of course, the TV movie itself was set in San Francisco in 1999. da. It was brought to us by Philip Siegel, who we have to give a massive, massive shout out to, because if it hadn't been for him, this would never have happened. We all now know the work that he did to get this thing on screen. And all I can say to him is, my God, well done. Well done, because it was a logistical, dramatic nightmare for him, because he was dealing with all these different partners. Again, for the first time in Doctor Who's history, it's sort of become a template for modern day Doctor Who now. But who's going to be the first to actually talk about this film? Because it's not going to be me. Come on, who?
Go on, Paul. Oh, everybody's shy. What's going on?
I know, Paul. You're going to tell us about what you thought of this.
I think
Paul's frozen.
All right, John, tell us what you thought.
You know me. I like to keep my opinions to myself.
Oh, look, Gary's joined us. Gary Brighton. Right, folks, just need to say I enjoyed this movie more than most of 21st Century Who. Fantastic, Gary. Thank you so much for that. Interesting. Nice to see you.
It's funny you say, JT, the fight that Philip Segal had to get this on and dealing with all different parties. That, I think, is in itself the story behind this TV movie. Because, as the old saying goes, a donkey is a horse that's been formed by a committee. You know, a horse is a nice thing, but left to a committee to decide what a horse should look like, it would end up looking like a donkey. All the constituent parts are there, but it just doesn't look the same, sound the same, or perform the same function. And I think Doctor Who, the movie, is very much a victim of being at the hands of too many different people shoving their tuppence worth in, making this effectively transatlantic pap.
I love the honesty. I know where you're coming from in that as well.
A lot of good things about it. But essentially, does it stand out from anything else? Does it try to do anything new? Does it relaunch Doctor Who with a bang? Transatlantic pap.
It's interesting because I mean, again, we always try with this review to say what you thought at the time, and of course, you equally have to say what you thought now. And sometimes, as time passes and TV passes and evolves, you sometimes do change your view. My view was absolutely stunningly changed. When I first watched it, I liked the opening. I mean, I think Terrance Dicks, when they went to the BBC showing of it, they said they liked the ER element at the beginning. With Puccini and all the rest of it. They liked that element. And I liked that. That was very gritty start. I mean, the proviso was it had to be set in San Francisco with all these muddled minds and different funding. They needed it in America. So San Francisco was planted there. British actor. Philip Siegel has done his best to keep elements of the show. He had to argue them, explain the sonic screwdriver, explain all these strange references. And so they've kept that in. I think the judgment that John, I suppose, he's judging it as one of the programs, but I think we've got to be careful that this is a pilot. And it's a pilot. And I mean, come on, look at loads of shows. If you look at a lot of shows, American included, when they have a pilot, it's never the best one. It just establishes a few things. I think if we judge it as in, what did it set up for a brilliant new series? We could see all the elements were there. We've just mentioned the TARDIS set with the amount of money and detail there.
I'm going to come right back at you initially. I know before you move on, just on that point alone, you're quite right. It is a pilot. But what pilot starts with a whole bunkum of backstory thrusting it down the viewer's neck within 10 minutes of it beginning? You know what I mean? If it is a pilot, you have to make it accessible. And immediately, the thing is inaccessible to probably 90% of the audience that's watching it, especially in the States.
I think for fandom,
just on those things alone, as a pilot, it falls flat.
The mistake was the. Oh, sorry, Paul. The mistake.
Go
on.
I was going to say, I think I agree with the idea that it doesn't really work as a pilot, but as a fan, I remember watching this originally thinking, wow, they've got McCoy back. That's great. But I can see why that is baggage for a general audience. But as a fan, it was fabulous. And I think the fact he looks great in that costume as well, sitting there in the chair having a cup of tea, and it's one of the things about the movie I think as a positive. Obviously, there's a lot of money put into it, but it's been shot beautifully. And Jeffrey Sachs, the director, for action, it's a great. It's like a, it's like Indiana Jones meets Doctor Who a little bit, kind of in terms of action. You know what I mean? It's a great. I think I like it a lot. It is a bit dated now from the 90s, but if you look back at any form of television that's 10, 20 years old, in fact, 2005 Doctor Who looks dated now. So I think it happens to all programs.
Paul, just let's deal with the initial point. Everything dates, not apart from itself, obviously. But let's just deal with the point. This is a pilot. When have you ever known a pilot going to an audience, to a territory which shouldn't know this property, to thrust onto its audience the leading man who will change within the first 20 minutes, a whole pile of backstory about Daleks and Gallifrey and the Master and all this sort of stuff. Terence Dicks, you mentioned Brendan Terence Dicks. Terence Dicks himself said that absolute nonsense to put that onto it. So if we just deal with its job as a pilot, it fails miserably.
Yeah.
However, I think on the comeback, we've got to just say what were the politics at the time as that pilot was being stitched together? There was discomfort about how the Colin Baker, mixed and blurred with the new start for Sylvester McCoy, and the BBC didn't want that. There was an emphasis by the American side, apart from San Francisco, that they wanted it to be this kind of John Doe character. And I have to say that there was an element I thought when I watched it again, it's almost like Spearhead from Space missed the actual regeneration from Troughton to Pertwee, and it would have put to bed some of the nonsense in the new series about all that and whether there's a gap there. But Spearhead from Space kind of almost rebooted straight into Pertwee, and you missed that kind of little link. It's 15 minutes. I agree with what you're saying but you see, what you're also saying, John, is it therefore was a mismatch and didn't work, except it was a success in Britain. It was a success.
It was a success in Britain because
in Britain, but we're selling it to the Americans too, to a territory which on mainstream American television had never been seen before. So let's just deal with that basic point. If it's a pilot, and if it's a pilot trying to, because whether it's a success in Britain or not, the show will have no future unless it's a success in America. And as it turned out, it didn't. It wasn't a success. So anybody tuning in for those first 10 minutes will go, turn it off.
But your argument would be, I mean, I agree on the Daleks. Why bring the Daleks back? Why have all this backstory about the Master going to Gallifrey and what the hell's Gallifrey?
The reason for all that was simply fan service, and I agree with John. It wasn't needed at all. I mean, in a sense, Russell T Davies learned from that TV movie, because he ejected everything when he brought it back and started again, and there was a real for a new audience, there was a mystery. But yeah, I agree with John. What happened with this is that you're putting it on, and it was a success in Britain simply because we know what Doctor Who is.
But the argument also is based on, we thinking, the plot had too many cracks in it, which it did if we were new to it. But it was up against Roseanne's finale, so it was hardly set up to succeed in America. And I think that
says a lot. I think that says a lot. I mean, we now know the full story of what went on in '96. And we know that by the end of the production, they'd all fallen out. The partners were not talking at all. They were so unhappy with the actual thing. So for Fox to put this on what it's scheduled as its big Tuesday night blockbuster thing at all, it wasn't really. And they would have known that Roseanne was about to finish as well. So it was a quick way of them saying, we want out of this. And it linked. Before we come to Bedweir and what he might say in here, I've got an answer here from Just Jordan as well. We asked Just Jordan what was happening there. Come back. Yes, this helped cement my love for Doctor Who. I've since gone back and rewatched all the classic episodes. Yay! Pertwee is probably my favourite classic Doctor, and I will always have a soft spot for because McGann's your first one. That's absolutely fair enough. Pete's saying here, very much a push me, pull me, but still a good try even at the time. He's grown to love it over the years. That's good to know. Well done there. Mm-hmm. Jamie says, I think this Doctor Who movie stands up well even today, and the special effects still good. Do you think so, Jamie? You think so, mate? I'm not too sure, personally. And Gary's saying here what we all think. The Daleks, I thought they were the Smurfs. But what's your take on all this?
So I'm a big fan of the TV movie, but I can completely acknowledge that it's very 90s.
Yeah.
I was also quite a fan of another of Philip Seagal's shows, Sequest DSV with Roy Schneider and a dolphin. That was really popular at the time. And this version of Doctor Who is very much an American export to the UK. And that in 1996, we were getting these US imports and enjoying them because they were a bit different from what we were used to in terms of BBC output and traditional drama that we'd see on that. So again, I think it works for us because at the time it's slightly different and it's a new take on Doctor Who that we haven't seen before. But for Americans, I don't think, as you say, adding all that mythos on top is enough to separate it from everything else that's on every other channel in that market.
Good point.
And I think that's where it failed, unfortunately, because you might have thought, oh, okay, well, there's all this backstory that people can get invested into and all that sort of stuff. But it's very hard you can't drop all that in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah. Do you know, that's interesting, Bedouin says that, because that's spot on. Because if you think about it, as I said earlier, that for us as a British audience, we were seeing Doctor Who for the first time, having money spent on it, and what Doctor Who would look like with a bigger finance and bigger sets, special effects budget, all that sort of stuff. However, for the other side of the Atlantic, all of their drama looks like this anyway.
Yes,
so
that's the thing.
It had to be stand out because the look of it was very much in keeping with how everything else looked. So the script, its message, whatever it was up to, had to be stand out, and it wasn't. It really wasn't.
I think we're very lucky to get what we ended up with, because I don't know if you've probably watched the 7-Year Hitch documentary on the Blu-ray or the DVD, and the hell that Seagal went through to get to where he got to, and all the different scripts and things that were considered. I think we're very lucky to get what we got, and actually, in that sense, there's a lot of positive, good things that came out of it for me as a fan. At least of all the money, obviously, that they spent on it.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right with that. I mean, we could have got more of the Indiana Jones style nonsense that was threatened, so we did get the best of a bad lot. For myself, I remember I went that day and I bought the VHS cassette, and I just watched it that day. I had the day off work and I watched it that day. I'm sure many of us did. I wasn't bothered about waiting for the next week or 2 weeks when it was going to be for the 27th of May broadcast. I didn't care. I just wanted to see it. I was that excited in a sense for it. But I have to be honest, guys, when I remember watching it that day and then feeling a bit sort of, and again recently, watching it just this week for us to review here on the show, I have to admit, hands up, I had to admit, I was bored out of my mind. I really was. I think the thing looks very 90s, as Badouia was saying, and John was saying. I think the thing looks dated, and by the time I got to that scene where the Doctor and Grace are in the ambulance and they're on their way with the Master to wherever they're going, I had to switch it off. I was just so bored with it by that point.
I'm confused slightly, because I know what you're saying, but equally, we did Mordor Undead recently, we've done Ice Warriors and that, and you'd say, well, that looked very 60s, that looked very 80s, but it was still watchable. Or I have to say, it still looks expensive Doctor Who, though, because even when Rose was on and End of the World, I don't know, I still think that 96 movie holds very well. It's an intact piece, and the detail of some of the sets, I loved the slow, which wasn't slow motion, but the way it panned around the ambulance when we had the built tension. I loved the TARDIS detail. We've never had a TARDIS like that, and they scaled it back, didn't it? Because the TARDIS was going to be even larger. It was going to have a library, wasn't it? It was going to have a study and everything. It was set up for a series, wasn't it? And yes, the pilots, you could say question mark all over it, although they tried to erase all the question marks. But if it was setting up for a series, okay, it failed on delivering that at the American end, but the set was there to deliver and deliver and deliver. And I just think it looks expensive. It look. If
I mean,
you say
well,
it
it
looks
does.
90, it looks expensive, and it looks more expensive.
Yeah,
and
it does.
higher
And I think
production
one thing
values than Rose.
it looks better than Rose, certainly. And I think when you look back at some of the things we've had recently, I think this stands up much better than recent efforts from various showrunners. But I agree, the sets are fabulous. And what I do like about this is the police box looks like a police box. It's not one of these
Do you think so?
reinventions of police boxes that they've done now. You know, it's a great prop. Yeah, definitely. It's a great prop. Fantastic prop.
Yeah.
I, in terms of the dated comments, you know, if I think about this piece as being dated, I don't mean in terms of how it looks, in terms of or its effects. It's just in terms of the way it's scripted and shaped. Perhaps it has a feel of 90s drama about it, a bit like 30 something. Or all those other sort of angsty dramas that were doing the rounds at that time, where everybody was basically staring up their own backsides instead of getting on with their lives. There's just an element of that to it. So, and it just takes a long time to get anywhere. Doctor Who fundamentally is a show about thrills, spills, scares, and monsters. There's not one monster in this, apart from a pretty dodgy snake pretending to be the master. And it lacks all those vital core elements which are part of Doctor Who. It just doesn't try to do that. And it should have done. One thing Rose gets absolutely right is it launches into scares. Very soon, the companion's running. The Doctor introduces himself to Rose as, "Hi, I'm the Doctor."
Run.
Well,
that's the ethos of the programme.
Run for your life.
And what
Yeah, no, but I
is
think
too much trying to be
I
like ER or 30 something or whatever, and it just
What you saying, Brendan?
When I said ER, I mean the classic thing is it looked like gritty Doctor Who. It wasn't kind of set on some pastel-shaped planet and all the rest of it. It was actually gritty. It was set on Earth, modern day, and it was selling the audience that it wasn't mumbo jumbo. I agree, elements of the plot spoiled that element if you were new to it, but it had grit at the beginning. You had a proper assassination of Sylvester McCoy, whether you knew who the hell he was or not, but you had somebody murdered in San Francisco, a complete victim in some back street unfairly. You then had an ER kind of, mad paced element. You had the tension with this master character and the snake effect. And I thought the music, the camera work. Now, you're always mentioning, John, the camera work. I thought the direction is, I've used it in my media studies teaching an awful lot, this Doctor Who movie. Yeah. There's an awful lot of very good, clever, thought through camera work. And I thought it built tension. And I think some of the stories we've mentioned before from earlier Doctor Who didn't have any tension. I thought this built tension very well. Now, I think I could put this Doctor Who movie into two parts. I mean, listening to what JT said, we watched it last night and I kept looking at the clock thinking, right, that's the first 15 minutes and I'm still with it. Because I knew that when I first watched it, I had some questions. I loved it all the way through. I was gripped by it. And I thought, do you know what? I've harshly judged this. I really enjoyed it. I thought this stands up really well.
Right. It is interesting. Let's have a look at some of the comments from the new the Who viewers on here. Woodhouse122 is saying he watched it a few days ago after a few years and quite enjoyed it. Parts of it felt like New Who. Well, it does, because it has a lot in common. It sort of ends, doesn't it? But then New Who takes elements of that, because in '96 television was sort of changing to where it was bound to get around about 2004. What's Gary saying here? Bought VHS from our price, getting soaking wet walking home, and the tape got jammed, so I had to get a refund and watched on the night, which ironically was hot. Okay. A great memory. That is a brilliant memory. Meddling Funk is saying the first 30 minutes are okay. After that, I lose interest. He said, I can relate to that, especially now. It was just long.
I did the first time, yeah.
Yeah, Peter Harrington sitting there. The opening titles just got me, and the music felt great after the Lost period. Then the narration, it drew me in. Maybe the Lost time drew me in more. The starvation of our Doctor. Yes, very probably. Jack's saying here the best bit was seeing the Seventh Doctor enjoying the jelly babies at the beginning. Absolutely. I mean, from my point of view, just to make clear on that as well. Oh, I've got a comment here from Alex, our friend Alex Storer. He says, I remember watching it on transmission more out of sense of duty than anything. I have fallen away from the series at that point and had accepted it was dead and buried. The film itself was okay. The saddest part was seeing the Seventh Doctor get shot. What a daft way to go. I never held the movie in much regard, despite Paul McGann being bloody brilliant, as was Eric Roberts. It has got better with age. It was a very strange time for a movie to be released. I know exactly what he means with that. But I would disagree, Alex, that it's got better with age, because as I say, I watched it this week and just couldn't get through it. I couldn't get through it. For myself, it felt like a chore to get through this. I'm not talking about the performances. I think from what you were saying, Brendan, as well, it's all well and good having money to build good sets, but I think the script needed a couple more bits of work on it, tightening up.
Go back to what you said and then relate it back to what Brendan said earlier on about the show being gritty and bits of ER. When I sat and watched this 2 nights ago with my first husband, when I say first husband, it's my current husband. I just call him my first husband to keep him on his toes. One thing he said was that he thought that McCoy's death, murder, if you like, was a horrible way for the Doctor to be killed in a hail of bullets in an alleyway in backstreet San Francisco.
It wasn't very Doctor Who-y, was it?
It's too real. It's too real.
Myself, you know what? He's right. George is absolutely right. That's not a good way. Even Pertwee against the Great One. Salvage is saving himself. Baker rescuing the universe. Davison giving his all for Perry, his companion. And then McCoy, who's far better because he's been a great Doctor, gunned down by thugs in a back street in San Francisco. It just wasn't Doctor Who. And if that's gritty Doctor Who, you can keep it.
That's not what kills him. That's not what kills him.
It's the operation.
Grace that kills him.
It's what happens that leads to him dying. That's the point.
Yeah.
See, I think Bedry is right. I think that's the bit that it's. We've had this before with the Bernard Cribbins character. And Perry, who you've mentioned, it's the companion who kills him.
But had he not been at the opposite end of a rain of bullets, most people who will watch that, the ordinary punters, will look at that and say he died because he was shot.
I have to say, I agree with you, John. I don't think that was. Hang on, Brendan. I don't think that had a place in Doctor Who at all. Doctor Who has always been Doctor Who has always been anti this, and what has happened is suddenly, because it's been Americanized in that way, he's actually been shot several times from this gun with these thugs. Now that's not the British way of doing things at all, and it was certainly a Doctor Who way to do things.
Can I say one thing then? I understand what you're saying, so I'll just say Caves of Androzani, gunfire, and that was quite...
Yes, but it didn't kill the lead character.
However, that was the background to it. That was a very gritty... Great Caves of Androzani was very gritty.
There's been loads of gunfire in Doctor Who, but never once has a Doctor been...
But that was drug running.
That was not just of gunfire, but of some sleazy drug-related Chicago...
Caves of Androzani, Shara's Jack.
Yeah, I know.
Tardy Spider here is saying something very interesting. It never joins Classic Who in the feel for him, and not quite new. I agree. The TV movie, especially on a rewatch, comes across as very much its own thing, on the cusp of doing very much its own thing.
True American.
And that's the whole point about it. I mean, one thing it proves to me is that you cannot Americanize Doctor Who. Doctor Who is quintessentially British, and here, because there's so many partners, and the BBC are, in my opinion, a bit of a lame duck, letting all these big players around them do what it wants to do. It's really not. It doesn't really gel, I don't think, and I didn't recognize it then, and I don't really recognize it now as being the same as Doctor Who. I do think it's got a little bit more in common with the reboot Who that came a few years later, but I think it's on its own. I think when you look at that, it really is on its own. Pete's saying here as well, it took him a while to see the extended violence, and he can understand why it was cut. Absolutely. Paul?
Yeah. I think it proves something that you cannot do a production with a committee trying to work out which way the program's going to go. Because I think if they had if Philip was left to do it on his own, I'm not quite sure how that would have went. But I do think it's been pulled in different directions, which makes it quite a tricky production. Like we said earlier about the pilot, it's being a pilot. It doesn't work as a pilot for America because it's too convoluted. But the positive for me, though, I have to say, I didn't get a chance to say this, was that Paul McGann, and I've got a little Paul McGann here just to show you, he is the best thing in it. And he is a legacy doctor who we should still be having coming back now as a new doctor because he was superb.
Yeah,
there's a couple in the chat that would agree with you because, of course, yes, the casting of Paul McGann, even to this very day, is the one thing that I think genuinely Doctor Who fans can unite on, because it was inspired casting and he does look good. But also, to his credit, McGann actually knew the Doctor to an extent. And he's trying desperately to find in this film, in a very short space of time, when you look at the page count, he's trying to find how to play the Doctor. And that must have been very difficult for him because, of course, again, it's a regeneration story. So he spends half the thing not knowing who he is. Why did they do that? Why didn't they just say to him, you are the Doctor and you materialize and bang, you're going? And he could have done a little bit more with it. And I think, you know, it's one of those things, isn't it? Fandom, as we're saying here,
when he gets his moment, or his last 20 minutes of the show, he is really the Doctor. He hits the ground running. For me, he's probably the most acceptable Doctor for me, as a kind of the new reign of Doctors, like for the new series. He's probably the one that for me worked immediately. He was superb because he just hit the ground running. And if he could get another series, that would be great.
Yeah, but we should have given so much more of him in the program. You're quite right. The best thing about this TV movie is the Doctor, is Paul McGann. And when you've got such a hot property, I don't know why you don't showcase him right from the first minute. And that is really what you should have done. What this movie is trying to do is trying to do two things. It's trying to be the last story of one Doctor and the first story of the new Doctor.
Absolutely.
Mash them all into one and expect a whole sort of consort of viewers who don't know anything about the show just to accept this and run with it. It doesn't work out. Interestingly, apart from everything, it was just Jordan has just said it in the chat there, and I agree fully, and this isn't a dig at the Americans, but it's interesting that when Torchwood itself, which I was never a great fan of,
no, me neither,
Torchwood itself is Americanized, it kills it. It kills it. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that says something about this iteration of Doctor Who as well. But to get back to the point, McGann's the best thing about this. I could have done with seeing so much more of McGann.
And he had to be heavily persuaded, didn't he? He didn't want to do it, did he? He said, I wasn't getting it. I knew the Doctor character, of course, being British, but I didn't want to do it. He had a long chat with his agent, obviously Janet Fielding. They had to discuss it at length. He needed lots of meetings. But then he got it, and I agree with what everybody's saying, because I think Paul McGann so underused. I mean, we saw glimpses of what he could do in that pilot, which was a shame because being a successful pilot, we never got the British series. But then after that, you know, Night of the Doctor, you got another thing. I've never done the big finishes, so I've seen him in 2 episodes, so to speak. And I just think, oh my God, give him a spin-off, give him something, because he is top class. He really does. He gets the role.
He is good, but I must be one of the few Doctor Who fans that wants that. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. Let's just move on. If you bring an incarnation back of the Doctor, as they have done a couple of times now, it takes away the emphasis for your current model, whether you like the current model. John Nathan Turner, God love him, used to have this thing he used to call Out of Doctor. It's still relevant today because there's millions of the buggers. I can't keep up with how many Doctors we're on now. Is it 14? Is it 15? What's going on? But there's millions of them. So if McGann was to have a sideline series as the Doctor, not only would fans get a little bit sort of confused, but why bother? You're supposed to have one series about the Doctor, not a previous incarnation, because they'd be running consecutively, and the public would go, what's happening here? Which one's modern? And then the McGann one would always be tailored to be able to say, well, at some point he's going to have to become. Now he's going to have to become John Hurt. I mean, it's just so complicated. Leave it, and let's just leave it. Move on.
But they're kind of doing that. They're kind of doing that now, aren't they? They're doing that now with David Tennant and Ncuti Gatwa, aren't they? They've got
who knows?
at the same
but
time.
That's another show. We're going to come to that into the future. Gary here is saying they tried to fit a whole series into 90 minutes. I understand what you're saying there, Gary. Yeah, they did try to do that. I do think had they had the time, had they had the inclination, yeah, I think a couple more script rights would have done that. I think they needed to get rid of all those kisses to the past and trying to get the fans on board, because we would have come anyway. But if it wasn't for this, though, as I've said before, Russell T Davies wouldn't have got it so right for Rose, because he obviously looked at this and thought, I'm not going to do it like that.
Yeah, and I think that's what's happened. You've had an evolution there. I think if they hadn't done the Doctor Who movie, you never know. RTD may have done it different as well and thought, I need to join it to the classic series, because I think it's important when you do a reboot that you do link it as well to the old series, because otherwise it's a standalone. And and I think I think for good or for bad, RTD saw that and thought, right, there's a different way.
Yes,
and of course. And what's his name? Stephen Moffat has then tried to make the little kind of gaps closed with various little mini
because
stuff.
the fans, I guarantee, if you hadn't had fans in control of the show for God knows how many years now, none of that would have happened. But there we go. Let's move on to the companion for this as well, because we had Daphne Ashbrook turn up in this one, didn't we? And I think Daphne's performance, I mean, I've been lucky enough to meet Daphne, and my God, she is fabulously. I mean, she's outrageous. She's very energetic, and she's very out there. She's like another version of Katie Manning. They've got that sort of that whole sort of energy going on. They're a little bit loopy, bless them. But I love that. But I think she nailed the part of Grace in this. Nailed it without having really done or probably been given any help as to how this is. She comes at it as her own character, Grace. And wow, what a performance, Daphne. Congratulations. She nails it.
I think she's fabulous. And I think one thing that works really well, because she's kind of a doctor, an authority figure, she's a bit like Liz Shaw. She's got more gravitas. She's kind of more important. She's not like a younger companion. So that makes her almost an equal to the Doctor, quite strong.
Good point. Yeah, it's nice.
Here's fabulous. One of the points, both myself and my other half said watching this, we thought, what a beautiful pairing McGann and Daphne make together. It looks as though they'll be working together for a longer period than that in which they had, which is always a good sign of people cooperating and working well behind the scenes. They just seem to gel quickly, and she just seems to get Doctor Who. I mean, although she's an American actor playing in an American production of Doctor Who, she does seem to get the humor of it. Yeah. She does a good bit of the old American double take stuff and all that sort of humor that the Americans are good at, but she just seems to get Doctor Who's distinct style, and she works well on that as well. I was most surprised that at the end of this that she's left on Earth. I don't know what the plan was had this gone to series, whether the Doctor would have gone back and picked her up again. I would like to think that he would have done.
Yeah, he would have.
That's a great pairing. I don't know whether the Asian child would also have come back as well, but
probably not, because I don't think that would have been counted there. But I think he would have done. I think there would have been a Rose type thing going on there, because we know that both McGann and Daphne Ashbrook were up to do the following series should it have gone to a series, and both had that loose options in their contract. Daphne has also said in convention since. Of course, she comes over to Britain fairly regularly, which is fantastic. When she comes over, how lovely that she comes to meet the fans. But she has said she would have gone for the series had it gone for the series. So it would have been the two of them together running through time and space. And that's one of the elements where I personally look at this thinking, oh, we've lost that, because that would have been nice to see. But by God, I would have dreaded the stories that were coming. Anyway, but I mean, Badwea, did you take to Grace?
Yeah. I adore Grace. I think she's wonderful. I think she's smart enough. She's got to a place within the hospital and, that technological institute and things like that. She's really smart. And that comes across because she wants answers to stuff. Something weird's got on. It's gone against everything she knows in terms of her medical training and whatever. And she wants to understand why. And she gets swept along, and there's the brilliant shot of her, running down the corridor in this flowing dress. I used to work in the NHS, and whenever I was called in to deal with something, I always had that image in my head. I think that's quite the same effect.
Just the image, or did you actually drag up?
I didn't have time. It was more emergencies than.
They should do that more often in casualty. Yeah,
It was a good. I thought the script, that's where it worked, you see. It was a good introduction to the companion. You got the backstory quickly. You only needed seconds of her at the opera, then back to her job. Therefore, you got the backstory about Brian and all the rest of it. And I think she was given, and you've got to say the script allowed it there. She was introduced really well and effectively. So you went with her. And she was an interesting character because she's a second American character. She wasn't Perry. She was more mature.
Oh, totally different to Perry. Totally different.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. So she was more mature, more independent, established in a relationship and all that stuff, high in her profession. There were a few moments in the script later on. I don't know if it was rushed exposition because she suddenly understood time differentials or something. She suddenly blurted out stuff.
I think that was about just making sure that this female character. Remember, this is still 1996, and this was all coming in at that point, wasn't it? There was this whole thing about equal billing and all, and quite right too. But I think that was making her his equal. I think that was really part of the character development there, to be able to say there's more to this woman than meets the eye. And I'm sure that would have been carried on had they gone to series to say, how does she know certain things like that? But it was very obvious that here we had a character that was just not stupid. I mean, the fact that in the show as well, 1 minute she's dealing with this little man, and then she's sort of accepting fairly quickly, because of the evidence of her own eyes, that little man is now this tall man, because her eyes are telling her this has to be real.
Well, I said that she was smart, but she does the television thing of standing still and waiting for Channel E to get out of the room before yelling "wait" and then chasing him. But that's just the quirk of television. But yeah, as JT you said, she's putting the pieces together based on what she's been shown. When she's shown the X-ray and she realizes, hang on, this isn't a double exposure. This is what
she's
it was.
clever. Yeah,
she's working it out, and she's got a microscope in a flat, or and is putting those pieces together and is working it out. And by the time she's trying to jumpstart the TARDIS, okay, there's a bit of creative license, but you believe enough that she's smart enough, that she has enough understanding of what she's doing and crucially why she's doing it.
Yeah,
so you go along with it.
She may not know what she's doing, but she knows she has to do it. And I remember that at the time when I watched that originally thinking, I like Grace. I could take to Grace. And she was a little bit different because we had moved on. We'd had 7 years without the Doctor, and so the series was, of course, going to mature. We all knew that was going to happen in 96, but we just didn't know which way it was going to go, whether or not it went the way we wanted to. We're having that conversation now. But with Grace, I think, with McGann, she was a real standout. I really took to Grace. I really liked her.
That's interesting because given the fact that Grace was so well introduced, there's a backstory being done with a few lines here and there, unlike what happens with the Doctor, where we go 10, 15 minutes of dump. Can you imagine how much better this would have been had the American viewers been allowed to discover the Doctor through Grace's eyes?
Totally agree. I totally agree.
Yeah. And that would have just made this, because the idea of the change from McCoy, and you still had McCoy, had you wanted, if we had to have all that, fine. But imagine her discovery being our discovery, and that just would have made for a better rounded story and would have involved the viewers a whole lot more. And as you said, Russell Davies learned those lessons. So when Doctor Who was brought back in 2005, we find out about the Eccleston Doctor through Rose's eyes, not the other way around. The Doctor just landed on the planet to meet Rose. We join Rose, and then Rose meets the Doctor.
I mean,
that's the way it should have been done in terms of piloting this new version of Doctor Who.
I mean, obviously, they went straight for it, didn't they, John? Because they said they were deliberately going to make this plot all about regeneration, brought the Master in with, that for good or bad, they went for it, didn't they? And because as soon as it's about regenerations, you needed McCoy, I can go into what you're saying about it's too complicated for 1 hour, 15 or 20 minutes. But they went for it, didn't they? And considering they went for it, I thought that worked well, and it was due respect to Sylvester McCoy. For good or bad now, I'm really glad he was in it for 15 minutes.
Did I read correctly that it was the BBC upper echelons and high regions, as we say in Glasgow, who were against using McCoy?
Yes, it was
any link to the past,
Yeah, it was. Well, actually, what they didn't want, as we now know, is Joe Wright, one of the executive producers acting on behalf of BBC Worldwide, as it was. It's now BBC Studios. Didn't want Sylvester McCoy and suggested Tom Baker. It was Phil Siegel that came along and said, no. If it's going to be linked to the last series, it has to be Sylvester McCoy. At one point, there were even negotiations. There were discussions about including Sophie Aldred as Ace, which wasn't going to go anywhere because Sophie was busy on other stuff as well. But that was scrapped very quickly on as too much continuity. If only they'd done a fine-tooth comb with the rest of it. But no, it was the BBC that said they didn't want Sylvester McCoy. And the reason for that, as we all know, is because that era was unpopular in the BBC and they didn't really want the late 80s acknowledged. That's my particular theory. I know it's a lot of other theories as well. I want to say thank you to everybody that's in the chat. We've got some great stuff coming here as well. Thank you so much. It's lovely to see all your comments. TARDIS Spider is saying about Grace here. You said she is clever. The best companions do not have to be educated, just clever. Brilliant. Peter is saying the Puccini line was a nice choice to connect the dots for her. Absolutely. And we didn't pick up that point. That was the big clue, wasn't it? Because from that point in the lift, because of what she's witnessing and what's happening to her, and then that bit in the car where the thingy comes out. There's the evidence of her own eyes, and she has to go, there's more to it going on here. Gary Bryant is saying the experiences are similar to Leela in a more polished way, in a sense. I get that, understand that. I mean, it's all. Thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it here on the WHOTASTIC panel. Keep the comments coming. Brendan, you mentioned him. It's time to bring him in. Eric Roberts was the master. Now, this was stellar casting for them, wasn't it? It really was stellar. I mean, come on. This was a name that was known in America. And did he pull off? Did he? Was he the master for you in this, though, guys?
No,
not really. No.
When he dressed for the occasion, I thought it went downhill fast.
That was very camp.
When you had the leather jacket, we had the black motif again. Very well, he wasn't Delgado and he wasn't Ainley, but he had the black motif and the sunglasses. I think at that point he was more sinister, more challenging, very mischievous regarding with the chutzpah to say to the young lad. He said that he was Genghis Khan, Doctor Who, and he was trying to get away with saying he's the evil one. The classic chutzpah of the master, deliberately trying to humiliate the Doctor and put him into a position he doesn't like to be in. At that point, and of course, all that gooey stuff and how he was with his wife when he went from paramedic to all that stuff. It was when he dressed for the occasion that I thought, well, maybe it's not the right occasion.
Okay, fair enough.
I often wonder how that was written. I often wonder how that.
Go on, Paul. It's okay.
So I was going to say, I often wonder how that was spelt in the script. I always dress for the occasion. It goes on a bit, but the interesting thing about it is at the time, I thought he was not great as the master for me, and in the 80s, when Anthony Ainley came along, I think there was some levels of fandom thought he wasn't as good as Delgado. But if you look at Eric Roberts makes Anthony Ainley look like Roger Delgado. He's much more subtle in comparison to Eric Roberts or subsequent masters along the line in New Who.
Well, Gary Bryant would agree with you because Gary's just put down here the only actor who made Anthony Ainley look like Al Pacino. That's brilliant. God bless Anthony Ainley, because of course he was a Generations master, and he did it really well. And he loved the master.
Yeah.
I actually missed him in this. I really was upset that Ant wasn't cast in this. Not for mainly the whole thing, but if they were going to go for that whole continuity thing, and they were going to introduce the master thing, and I know that, you know, I think he would have had a ball for that money.
There was no way. If they were doing everything else, they could have had Anthony Ainley on at the start in that tin hat, surrounded by Smurfs and getting shot. You know, they could have done all that too. That would be great. You know, but again, it's Americanization, and this was an Americanized master.
Yeah. And again, it's given Doctor Who fans all around the world another two incarnation, because Gordon Tipple is now also a version of the master. It's just like, who, what, where's that come from? It does make me laugh that we go for Pete's saying here, sorry, Roberts doesn't really work for me. He's okay. He's okay. Again, he's playing a sort of, oh God, an American. Yeah, you're right, John. He's playing an American idea of what the master is, and I mean, he's not camp at all, is he?
He's okay.
It's like when Americans try and do panto. You know, it's like
not at all. No.
and so I thought he was a master of two parts. The build-up good, and I think when it was the final iteration of him in the TARDIS, so to speak. No, and that's when I started to lose it with the whole plot, really, the Eye of Harmony and all that stuff. That's when I just thought, you know, it was a bit like the new series where you just think, please don't do one episode stories, because there's a rush job at the end that makes no sense at all, and you're throwing in things that never happened before. The Eye of Harmony and the TARDIS and all this stuff. And you just think, I don't know what's going on here. It's a shame, because the build-up, I thought, for me, worked. And it was just that final bit when, you know, was Eric Roberts about to be the Doctor? Because, by God, he had long enough to kind of absorb all his energy. It was only in that last second. And you think, oh, right, well, what happened? Was it full wipeout? It was interesting. It was interesting when they said in the rehearsals that Daphne and Paul really got on. And they said Eric Roberts never quite fit the crew. They always said he stood out. He was different. He was distant. And they just said it. I mean, it was interesting because reading between the lines, Paul McGann says a few things where Daphne says, you can't say that. And there's an element where I don't know if it was a happy crew regarding that.
Was he not playing I'm the big star, perhaps?
Well, very probably.
Bit,
yeah. But I remember going to a convention just before he passed through here in the United Kingdom, where John Pertwee, God love him, was not impressed with what was going on this. He was not impressed with this new version, which he never actually got to see either. Don't forget. But and he was sitting there basically saying that through his contacts, which would have been in show business, of course, he was hearing that Mr. Roberts was not being the ideal workmate, was lording it around a little bit on set. He'd heard that Mr. McGann was having a lot of difficulty on set trying to get that through. I mean, all these things have come out. I mean, obviously, it's all water under a bridge now because they seem to get on these days. But again, back at the time, who was the star? Eric Roberts got billing in America over Paul McGann.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, it was the other way around. But no. Oh, it was Eric over there, and that's why they chose him. That's why they put him in the role.
I think.
Yeah, wasn't that a stipulation of the crew? So was that a stipulation of Fox?
Oh yes, it would have been. Yeah, they wanted the name. Yeah, they had to have an American name. Yeah. TARDIS Spider is saying here as well. This Americanized Doctor Who is not the worst of our efforts in UK remakes. Red Dwarf Pilot, who's referring to, never seen it. Wouldn't, to be honest, TARDIS Spider, mate, I wouldn't go near that.
The In-Betweeners version is a million times worse.
Oh, you see? It doesn't work, though. I mean, their version of AbFab flopped, and yet the British version's a huge success over there. I've never understood this. It works the other way as well. For years, The Golden Girls, for example, was a huge success on American television. 7 seasons, was a huge hit over here in the 80s and into the early 90s. ITV buys it, produces The Brighton Bells. What a load of old pants that was. None of us wanted to watch it. It was absolutely... Why don't they just... Oh, well, anyway, I'm going off on one. Woodhouse 122 says, the Master taking the Doctor's remaining regenerations was ripped off later by Chibnall in The Power of the Doctor. Oh.
Yeah.
Strange
Hold
on. Yeah, we were just missing the Bonnie M soundtrack.
Chris Chibnall did something and pinched somebody else's ideas. Chris Chibnall.
Yeah, it's amazing that. It's amazing
Never.
that. Peter here is saying, imagine Christopher Walken playing the Master. Okay.
Silence.
Well, in a film, he can play villains quite subtly, can't he, Mr. Walker? I've immediately gone, Pete, to Batman Returns, actually. And
wow, me too. Me too.
Yeah, it's a good point. I like these all the alternatives we get from all our viewers here as well. Okay, so we've got that element of the Master coming through. I mean, that's where really, on my rewatch here, and I think possibly also originally, this whole thing about the Master trying to gain the Doctor's lives, I still don't understand that. And this whole thing about the Eye of Harmony being in the TARDIS and able to take the Doctor's future incarnations away, where a few years earlier we'd had that whole thing, as in our review for Mordrin Undead, it has to be done through some really scientific. I mean, I just think, it's quite fanciful. This is really science fiction, because how's that going on? But still, we find ourselves on this chase, and it's going away, and it's all about time. Then, isn't it? Suddenly, the time thing comes through as well, and this is, I mean, at this point, guys, are any of you starting to tune out like I did, or is it just me?
I think it does sag a little bit in the middle. I think it does a little bit. And when the time they get to the atomic clock section, it does start to drag a little bit. But I have to say this, I've not had a chance to say this, but I love this movie. I think I've got great memories of the time when it came out. I went to HMV to buy it. I queued till at 12 o'clock with 6 other Doctor Who fans. I'm sure there's more than that. And I have great memories of this story.
Yeah, there was about 8 of you. Bedouin, what were you saying, Bedouin? What were you going to say there?
Oh, I can't remember now. My mind's gone blank. No, I think I agree. It's the idea of the Master stealing the Doctor's regenerations works because we've established he's at the end of his life cycle through the Deadly Assassin and stuff like that. But the way they go about it is where it falls apart. With the opening of the Eye of Harmony, which, again, if you're watching the Deadly Assassin, the Eye of Harmony's on Gallifrey and it's a different thing. And the fact that being open means that the world's going to end at exactly midnight on New Year's Eve. And just all
coincidental.
Like that's where the plot stumbles and falls at the last hurdle, really. I think it's got enough interesting stuff prior to that. But once you're trying to put the ultimate peril in, it falls flat, and it's a bit of a mess in the end.
It's the reset button again.
Can I just say something as well?
The reset was awful. Yeah,
indeed, yeah. But the whole thing about the reset, there we have the schmaltzy ending, and they've left themselves with hostages to fortune here, because if there were to be future episodes, and at the end of each episode there are the Doctors stepping over the bodies, why doesn't it just reset? If it can be done in the pilot episode, it can be done for every subsequent episode.
Yeah. So, well, it was, in a sense, when we get to 2005.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, on occasion. But nonetheless, at the pilot of this thing, when we're meant to sort of introduce the concept, and, a big thing, if you remember, in although you slag off, in modern Doctor Who, they make, in the new series, they make a point of saying everybody lives, because the Doctor comes with death as part of the bargain. The character introduced in Rose, played by Mark Bent at the time, says that, wherever the Doctor goes, death is his companion. So death is very much a big part of what happens in Doctor Who. So in this pilot, we have the Doctor, or the TARDIS, or the Doctor and the TARDIS, reversing the deaths of Chang Li and Grace.
How?
And that sets a big thing for the future of the series had it gone forward. Why doesn't he do that every time?
Yeah, why doesn't he? I mean, we have to point out as well that this is the first time something called a reset button is actually used in Doctor Who, because the writing in the original series, 1963 to 89, was writing. It was proper writing. It was imaginative. It was able to get out of something that they put themselves in. I cannot recollect any time in between 63 and 89 where the reset button is pressed as often as it is in this film, and as often as it is in what happened.
In Earthshock, Nissa and Tegan asked the Doctor They say that explicitly. This is a time machine. Why don't we go back and prevent it from happening?
And they say no.
I can't.
The thing I didn't understand is how. Yeah, I agree with you that the companions, so to speak, are dead in the TARDIS. It's over. I mean, that's it.
I know they're littering the place.
How? Yeah, with a bit of autumnal leaving.
Where did all those bloody leaves come from? And the bats?
No.
For Christ's sake.
Well, it's very symbolic. So I think the problem was then you don't age in the TARDIS. Time doesn't travel in the TARDIS, and so why did they suddenly get renewed? Because the TARDIS went back in time. They're still in this perpetual state in the
and why
TARDIS.
weren't there two of them?
Sorry, two
Graces and two Chang Lee's, whatever his name was. I forgot his name now. You know,
Yeah.
why weren't there two of them? Because they've gone back in time. So where's the Brnovich limit? See, this is what we fans like to know, isn't it, who viewers? Yes.
Because the Brigadier was taken to the centre of the TARDIS, say the 77 version, wasn't he? And we had all that stuff. I didn't get that. And that's called speedy writing. That's lazy writing. But like I said to you, it was that bit at the end where it was kind of, they wanted a climax. From all the trailers, I thought the climax was just that we're going to get New Year's Eve and it was going to be quite dramatic in some way.
No.
This Eye of Harmony thing and trying to steal his lives, and then suddenly we have some violence and the companions die, and then they can be brought back by the TARDIS going back in time. Well, God, companions would be, Sarah Jane Smith would die if they went back 5,000 years. I mean, I don't understand how this works.
I know, and we never found out because it's just there, isn't it? And you have to. It's as though they're telling you, "Well, this is how we can do this now." But as John says, I totally agree. The damage there is then done because if they'd gone to series, and certainly things that will happen from 2005 onwards, well, why don't you just do that all the time? Why don't you just turn back time all the time? You're a time lord, and then just turn it back, and you can't because it's lazy writing. You've got to have a good end to a story, and unfortunately, I don't think that was. And what happened to the Master? Because if they went back in time, he would have still been there. Oh, it's so confusing. I'm getting one of my headaches. I tell you something else, guys, that gave me one of the headaches at the time, and still does to this day.
Yes. Yeah.
The kiss. Well,
I thought you were going to. I
thought you were half human on my mother's side. You wouldn't say, but
well, no, I wanted to come to that in a minute. But this took the world by storm, and especially in the United Kingdom. When we heard that the new Doctor was going to have smoochy time with his companion, I was totally against that. A lot of us were totally against that. I'm still against it. I still find any of that nonsense embarrassing to watch, and I'm now of the day. Even on the rewatch of the day, I would.
RTD. This is what we were talking about. What RTD copied and what he changed. So he decided when I reboots not to do regeneration. He did copy that bit though. We can have some smooching and the Doctor dances, and we can have Rose and a love affair.
And it stays right into Moffat's era, and then there's Capaldi, where you've got a different sort of Doctor there, but this sort of heartbreak that Clara's got. I mean, and I think it was still put into the Chibnall series. Correct me if I'm wrong. God knows what's going to happen now. But it doesn't sit for me. That's what sits from that Doctor onwards away from the original 7. Because there is no way that was in Doctor Who. And I still don't understand. I think it's the American thing again.
Yeah, he was asexual, I thought, the Doctor, wasn't he?
The Doctor's an alien. He's not a human being.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the same thing. Gary's reminding us here of that famous saying, no hanky-panky in the TARDIS. And I can tell you as well, that was one element that JNT did not like about this TV. He was a great supporter of it because he was a professional. There were certain aspects, as all the professionals, if they're honest, will point out to you, they weren't happy with. That was the one thing they've crossed the line.
Well, mind you, I thought it started to happen when you saw the bedrooms of Adric and Nissa and that.
No.
Yes, but Peter Davison always said that the only companion he could put his arm around was Adric. He wasn't allowed to do everything.
And you can't do that now. Is that Woodhouse 122 with Rory there, the storyteller, is saying hated it at the time, but then seeing Amy Pond going after the Matt Smith Doctor, it feels tame now. You're absolutely right, because that was shocking to me as well. That was a step way over. I thought you can't let kids see this.
I agree with Woodhouse 22 there, because the kissing thing doesn't bother me. It really doesn't. As long as there aren't tongues, it doesn't bother me. But what I found distasteful and extreme was that scene, not only where Amy Pond has a go at the Doctor on her bed in her bedroom, but it's on supposedly the night before her wedding. I just find it completely distasteful to be in a program like Doctor Who, you know, and I just, no. They sort of backpedaled on that going forward later
But
on.
it all started here in this
it was a bit
episode.
lame.
You know, it all started with this episode, because the first one you can overlook. And then she says, "I'll do it again," and he does. But then this one is obviously the American influence coming through, that they have to have some sort of smoochy, kissy, blah, 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 blah thing in a drama. I just don't get it. And it doesn't sit with me. Don't like it.
I don't mind it. I don't have a problem with it because it's how television changed, and this was more common. But I can. It fits Paul McGann's Doctor for me because he's kind of this romantic figure.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for me when it's Christopher Eccleston, weirdly. I found that to be...
Would it work for you if it was Sylvester or Colin?
No, because it's not... No. Because those companions are different. But...
It wouldn't work with any of the original 7.
Yeah.
Go on, Bedwyr, sorry.
No, like, I feel like it fits more with McGann, and I completely agree with you. To end on that shot is purely, for the benefit of the audience. It's not within the characters or whatever.
And not the British audience, let me say, because it did cause an uproar here in Britain. And the Radio Times did have some letters from the public, the not-we's, the great British public, who came saying, no, that's not on. Anything in the future, we'll cut that out. So they never listened. They never listened to us at all. But, I mean, yeah, we've got a comment here. I mean, you mentioned it there, Paul. Let's get on to it. Oh, God, this again. The half-human thing. I mean, Gary's saying the half-human thing was obviously below his belt. You naughty commented there, Gary. naughty, but funny. Do we think? I mean, that is now being forgotten, which proves my point constantly that certain things, depending on who's in charge, are sitting at that desk in Cardiff, can be conveniently forgotten. The whole half-human thing has been conveniently forgotten. It's never to rear its ugly head again, unless you're watching this show. So let's let it bring it out here.
Can I say something?
Yes, is that the point where the McGann Doctor is testing out the water of his half-human side?
Probably, yes. But I think the half-human thing, canon's an interesting thing. Maybe we should come to that another time. But
we will.
In your own canon, you can decide what is canonical or not. And so the half-human thing seems a bit of a weird thing to do. It makes the Doctor a bit like Mr. Spock, which seems
it's the American thing again, isn't it?
Yeah.
It'll make him relatable. Well, that's the whole point of the Doctor. He's not supposed to be relatable in any of his incarnations. Yeah,
it's the companions you relate to. That's the whole point. Yeah.
That's the trick. And this is what they didn't get. Or if they did get... I mean, Siegel must have known this. Philip must have known this. And he was probably, because of what was going on, as we've discussed, overruled, because these American networks would have said, no, we need a bit of romance and kisser. But
Matthew Jacobs said when he wrote the script, he said it is half in jest, so it can be taken either way.
I will hold my hand up, and for several years, I thought it was just a line for him to steal that bloke's badge. And it was only on rewatching it that the master picks up on it, and then, oh no, they actually mean this. Oh, that's kind of ruined my thought on it.
And how would the master have seen that just through the retina of the Doctor?
Yeah, like as a line to get in somewhere, I bought it, and I was like, okay, fine. That's for a purpose. It's slightly better than him getting the sonic screwdriver out.
Do you know
when it's built into the character? No, Yeah,
because it's odd because it's not integral to the plot.
Not at all.
It just seems to be thrown in there, in amongst everything else that's been shoved onto the pile. I don't understand why they did it. Maybe it's to make the character more relatable. Maybe it's to give an excuse for the kissing. Maybe we're going to have a whole bedroom scene. Had it come to a series? Who knows?
It goes back to it's the Eye of Harmony thing again, isn't it? So
yes,
weirdly, only human eyes can open the Eye of Harmony. Like that doesn't make any sense because it's
Well, can I just say something about that? As a big Finnish fan, they've retconned that.
Yeah, but that doesn't count because not but the rest of us don't listen to that sort of stuff, so it doesn't count.
We're talking about canon, so I'm just saying.
Yeah, but it's not canon.
My big irritation, and it was picked up by the blooming Jodie Whittaker blooming doctor, is this nonsense where he kept saying, "Don't be here next New Year. Don't answer question 3 on an exam." Since when was the doctor some sort of fortune teller? I wasn't into that sort of stuff.
Nostradamus.
No, I hated that. I thought, well, if he knows the blooming future, what's the blooming point?
Yeah, I mean half an hour earlier, he didn't know who he was. Half an hour after that, he knows who everybody is and where they've got to be and what they've got to do and what their future history is. The script's a jumbled piece of, I might have mentioned this, Americanized.
It's interesting though what you both said. I mean, Paul, you mentioned the Big Finish stuff, which have done that, but Doctor Who Monthly, of course, Doctor Who magazine did its own version of this, where the Doctor eventually re-meets Grace in the comic strip, which was a unique thing for them to do, a very brave thing for them to do as well. And she's completely ruined everything because of a line he says to it: "You're going to do great things." And in the comic strip, the Doctor Who magazine team, she didn't, because she was expecting to do all these wonderful great things, and she just messes everything up, and she's in a mess when he encounters her again. So again, it depends which one you're looking at, but it's these little lines that they put into the show that just don't, they're trying to be clever and it doesn't quite get there.
Why did they give McGann a blooming wig? It doesn't start. It's its own character. It's awful. He would have looked like Chris Eccleston if they'd just gone for what he blooming looked like. He looked. That's
exactly, Brendan, what they didn't want. Apparently, when McGann turned up for his first day of shooting with a skinhead from his last film, they had kittens because they were expecting to see him with the hair he had in his audition, which they went for. So that's why they very quickly ordered him up a very bad wig. Gary Bryant said if they'd gone to a series, the whole Who family, both sides, would have appeared, no doubt. Well, they were talking about bringing his father into it. You know, Ulysses with his father.
The hair is that they were
after half human thing explains Peter Cushing, doesn't it?
A Byron-esque look, so that's the reason why he wanted him to have the long hair. I actually don't mind the wig. I think the hair is a good thing.
Just Jordan's pointing out this one.
I much prefer his second look when he makes an appearance in the Night of the Doctor. Right. I think that's a much better look for the McGann Doctor.
This comment here from Just Jordan is very good. Are we assuming that aliens don't have romantic feelings, though? I never really got the point of the half-human aspect even there. It's a good point. Yeah, I think I am, from the fact that between 63 and 89, there is no evidence from the Doctor being romantic at all. Not in that sense, not in the kissy, lovey sense. He's totally asexual. He is an alien. He isn't interested in that. There is a sort of bond you could look at between Romana, but that's because she's of the same species as him in a sense, and then that develops. So it's never been looked at that point. This was don't forget, in 96 this was a totally new element for us, which the majority of fandom didn't go for, let's be honest.
I'd love Jordan, who said he was 6 at the time. I'd be fascinated, because we all know what it was like to be kids watching Doctor Who, and it was all about the adventure. There was no romance or anything. I'd love to know what Jordan thought as a 6-year-old with the kissy stuff going on. You know, I mean, that's not normally what a 6-year-old wants from the show. They want adventure and fun and tension. So I'll be intrigued what he thinks about that, because that's a funny, well, you know, it's not where you want to go, is it?
Well, it's not. And it's one of those things, as I say, that, I mean, it has conveniently been forgotten, and it's never to rear its ugly head again. And let's hope it doesn't, because it opens up so many cans of worms. And again, it was that American thing, you know, it was the Mr. Spock element. It was the whole thing, as I said earlier, about them trying to make the Doctor accessible to an American audience. It's utter nonsense. And let's hope it never, ever gets talked about again. And let's hope certain other things don't get. I mean, if you can retcon that, you can retcon anything. We're live.
You can, that's
it. So anyway, what we've got going now. Go on, Paul, what are you saying?
I was going to say, you can retcon anything, which is great. But I want to go back to what Brendan was saying about a younger audience watching it. I wonder how scary it actually was. I mean, we talked about the snake special effects. They're not great in hindsight now, but at the time they may have been quite spooky, quite scary for younger viewers, because the atmosphere is quite dramatic, isn't it?
Well, we did have, and I've got it here, so I'll just refer to this. We did have Doctor Who magazine had in 1995 shown a Terror of the Zygons to a primary school. They were all the ages between 7 and 11, and they loved Terror of the Zygons, and they gave it a real thumbs up. And one of the quotes I always love, and I've got it here, is that they somehow thought there were millions of Zygons in those 4 episodes. Oh, there's millions of them. And I love that. And those kids will all be grown up now and hopefully all having a lovely life, and good luck to them. And I hope they're all fine and dandy. But then what they did is they went back to the same class a few months later with a copy of the TV movie and gave it them to watch. And they also loved that. And again, they were between the ages of 8 and 11. And they gave it another thumbs up. And the CGI snake, which now is slightly dated, but tell me any CGI that isn't looking dated and won't look dated, that got a massive thumbs up as being very, very scary. So there we go. I mean, you know, that age group were loving it. You're watching Who's Views Reviews. We're talking about the TV movie. Thank you so much for joining us. We are live. Please give us your comments. Thank you all for the feedback. It's really lively tonight, so keep it all coming. We have to talk about, and Brendan mentioned it earlier, let's move on to the set design, because although I'm a great believer that set design does not make an episode, a story, or a theatre production, it bloody well helps. And certainly the set designs for this movie are spot on, gorgeous. Even the rundown hospital set, which I think was taken from the X-Files. No surprise there. I mean, this has now gone down as legendary, and also as one of the most popular console rooms ever in fandom, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's a great console room. The console itself is fabulous. It's got echoes of the Hartnell TARDIS a little bit. What I don't like about the room is I don't like the fact it's not very TARDIS-y. They've got this idea. I always thought the TARDIS was meant to be an advanced craft, and the Doctor then decorates it with furniture like Hartnell did. But in the TV movie, it's like the TARDIS itself is an old vehicle. I know it's ancient, but you know it's like it's run down. It's not. If you look at the Hartnell TARDIS and Unearthly Child, it's a fantastic space littered with furniture and objets d'art that the Doctor's collected. But I just think the actual room itself isn't so great, but the console's fantastic.
I think it had a mix of Hartnell's beginning, where the console didn't necessarily, well, it dominated, but there was a lot more to the Expanse. But it was a bit of the Baker Edwardian console room. And I like that mix. I mean, obviously he'd had power cuts. That's why it was obviously run down, because he had so many candles. I mean, honestly,
health and safety.
I mean, he has to live forever to light all them blooming candles.
It's true. I mean, what House 122 was, it must have took the Doctor hours to light those bleeding candles. But you know what? It was the 90s, and there were candles. Do you remember, guys? There were candles everywhere in around about 1996, 97. You couldn't go into any pub at all, because we used to have pubs in those days. Everybody, you know, you were just, why are all these bloody candles around? So it was actually on trend, if you like, at the time. Pete's saying here he can't remember. Are there steps as you walked into the console room? He's not seen this for. There were steps as you went into the console room. I'm not sure if I've got a picture of them, to be honest. But there were. I had this picture though of the set being created, which you may not have seen, and it shows just how different it looks in the full light. So these two pictures here are very clear. On the right-hand side, that you can see the main doors. So they've changed, obviously, from the beautiful and my favorite doors, those big, heavy white doors, to these big, heavy brown doors, which had rondels imposed on them. There are stairs leading down there, Pete. There was also a slight raise up onto the console platform itself, as you can see there, as the console is being prepared to be moved into place on the left-hand side. But I hadn't realized, because the lighting was so, what they would call atmospheric, I didn't realize there were curtains around the side of the room and all this sort of stuff. I mean, it's an impressive set. It does look great, but I wish we'd see more of it in the light.
Yeah, it seems to refer, in some ways, it's very Jules Verne. Of course, it's very H.G. Wells. I love the fact that, I'll be honest with you, because I love the Hartnell's beginning, you know, An Earthly Child. That was stunning. But I like the way this, for the first time, seemed like the Doctor's home. I thought the beginning and the end really worked well on that, because, you know, that didn't quite fit. Yes, it's the console room, but there must be somewhere the Doctor goes. Like I've referenced earlier, you saw sometimes the companions' bedrooms and stuff like that, but it actually worked. It made sense to me, and in that way, that was more realistic, that this is the Doctor's home. It's not just the console. He had an area where he had a cup of tea, and you could listen to his record player and all that. You know, there's that. And I every time it happens, I love the reference to H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. I just love it because that was obviously one of the original stimuli for this whole series. I love all those little touches like that. But I had to keep looking at that TARDIS set last night because there's the Gothic, of course. I wasn't too sure about the roof, the kind of glass house effect.
I like
that. Was the scanner. That was the scanner, wasn't it? That was supposed to surprise us because the Doctor pulls a switch to look outside.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the idea. That was supposed to be what was that. Now, to be honest, elements of this, of course, have made it into the reboot version when it came back to 2004, 2005. You've got the rotor raising up into the roof. In the reboot series, you had the ceiling was supposed to reflect the outside through lighting. It wasn't really sustained, but it was there. I mean, there's a hell of a lot that is retained through all of this as it moves on. So it had a huge impact on the next generation of designers and people that worked on the show.
What cracked me up about the console though was the handbrake they had on the TARDIS.
Yeah, that was quite funny. That was quite funny, and that was a sort of little wink to the eccentricity of not just the Doctor, but the TARDIS itself, wasn't it? So I didn't enjoy that bit. We have to actually, I don't know if you've seen these guys, but we have to say that the TARDIS console set was actually saved from being axed, destroyed, whatever you want to call it. Let's give him a shout out here. Let me just get my notes here. Where's the name? Oh, Paul, Doctor Who fan Paul J. Salamoff, who reconstructed the column and currently lets fans and ex-actors alike visit it. So Paul McGann, Daphne Ashbrook, and Yichi Sato have all been visited. And as you can see here in this, it's a centerpiece here in some sort of exhibition in museum, because you can just see some of the previous Doctors around the outside there. But it's lovely to know that he's looking after that, because that's an important part of Doctor Who's 60-year run, isn't it?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah. And it's lovely to see that. So well done you for getting it, rescuing it, and looking after it, because it's a beautiful piece of work. Whatever we think of the episode, the TARDIS and the TARDIS console looks amazing.
Yeah, I think you're right, JT, because as we've discussed, flaws with Paul McGann's wig or the plotting, some of the technical stuff is really good. And, the design, okay, the cloister room is supposedly, a cloister is kind of small. And
small
it's
place, yeah.
Massive on this occasion. And the TARDIS console room is great. The Institute where that's filmed, that looks great. That looks like a proper venue for scientific research. The hospital stuff, all the design elements of the TV movie are really good. And as you said at the top, JT, they threw money at it and it shows. It makes a hell of a lot of difference to have a 360-degree set instead of 3 flats and something plonked in the middle.
I'd love
Can I say something about the cloister room? I was going to say, what always gets me every time I watch this is when the bats come out, and I just think Scooby-Doo every time. Do you get that vibe?
Yeah,
totally. Yeah. So I never understood that. I mean, what were they doing there? But then again, I do always get reminded of Tom Baker saying that there's an entire world or two inside the TARDIS, and who are we to say that there shouldn't be bats in there? True. Or there shouldn't be other animals in there? He's probably collected these things, as he's or he's saved them, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know how it got there. But I would have said, and as Gary said there, it was more Batman Returns than Doctor Who. How big is the cloister bell? Pete wants to know. Deafening, I bet. Actually, that's a good point. That would have been quite scary. And Woodhouse 122 is saying it's a shame the 35mm film has been lost of these. The TARDIS interior would look stunning in proper HD. Absolutely would. It absolutely would. Just Jordan, she's saying to us, I won't be able to unsee that now about Scooby-Doo. And that's what, it's wicked. It's wicked, isn't that? That's absolutely wicked. This was a big thing, though, for Doctor Who fans. It was a big thing as well for BBC Studios. And this was the start of the BBC starting to get hold of what a little thing called merchandise actually meant. And I don't know about you guys, but I was actually stunned, because what happened, of course, and somebody mentioned it in the chat earlier, at that point we were just getting VHSs, and we were getting several a year. and then bang, suddenly everything stopped from January onwards. If you got the Hand of Fear VHS, you were very, very lucky, because that was recalled very quickly and it was stopped. So if you got it out, I got it from John Menzies in Glasgow, so I was lucky. And there was a certain person that would go on into the series there. That was at the time, but that's another story. So we got that, and then it stopped and it didn't come back. You got a release commemorating John Pertwee's death, which was the Green Death, but everything had to stop for the 1996 TV movie. But goodness me, there was so much going on, because you had the novel of the film, the script of the film, the VHS, of course, you had a postcard book, you had the original soundtrack recording available to order, you had record bags, you had all sorts of stuff going on. I can't show you all of it. You had T-shirts, a lot. I mean, Badweer's got them, and we've all got stuff from back in the day. I mean, it was all there. I remember I've got Seal of Rassilon. The Seal of Rassilon was obviously going to be their version of the Enterprise's emblem in Star Trek, because it was everywhere in the TARDIS. It was obviously a marketing device. I don't know what you guys think about that, but suddenly you saw this: key rings, record bags, earrings, chains, all this sort of stuff was coming out. And that's what struck me to say this is a new phase for Doctor Who, because suddenly they seemed to have an angle of what they wanted to do with this, and it was becoming a little bit sort of that thinking, right, hang on a minute, I've just bought this mug for $9.99. Was it really worth it? Do you know what I mean, guys?
Yeah, and just like we like the diamond logo coming back now for the 60th, to bring back that logo, was a lovely hark back. And
oh yeah, definitely.
To see that in the opening sequence and to see that used in all the merchandise, I thought, yeah, you're hitting the right note there, because we're harking back to early 70s when when you should hark back. And
absolutely. I mean, we spoke about the Radio Times' coverage, but of course, Doctor Who Monthly was around then, and they got involved with it as well. They produced not just the usual monthly, but this was designed by Panini and produced as the Doctor Who movie special for those youngsters that were not into Doctor Who. They hadn't seen the Doctor before, or were sort of aware of it. And this is actually quite a nice little comic, because what it does is it introduces the Doctor and then the concept of regeneration, and it sort of more or less says, go and ask your mum and dad about this sort of stuff. It introduces it gives you the TARDIS, it introduces you to Grace, it introduces you to the Master, it gives you a little potted history. And it had a big poster of Paul McGann in the middle of it. It was a lovely thing to have. And there we have it there with Badweer. Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of us will have that, but as an introductory magazine, what a clever thing to do.
Can I just say, as a segue to our next program, the one thing I can't remember, Blue Peter always helped promote. Did it promote this one?
No, it didn't.
Don't think so, no.
It didn't do in 1996. The reason being because it was quick and it was fast, and but also there were certain rights issues and stuff like that, as there are still today. I don't think everything's sorted out there, but there were a hell of a lot of rights issues. I mean, Grace, for example, is a nightmare to use in anything in the future, because she's not just a BBC character, she's also owned by the various divisions of where they ever are now with Fox and Universal. I can't keep up with who owns who over there. It's probably Disney, to be honest. Oops. But anyway,
wasn't there a rights issue to do with the theme, and it cost Universal thousands to get the rights to
yes, they had to pay for it. And Brendan, you were saying that this was an expensive film. It was even more expensive because they went over budget, and then they had to pay for certain things they weren't expecting to pay for, like the theme. And that might be another reason why the Dalek voice is so squeaky, because they would have had to pay for something else. Jack's saying it was $1.99. It absolutely was, which he also says would be $9.99 today. Well, I wonder what's going to come next, because we know there's a Panini special coming for the 60th anniversary to do with the forthcoming episodes. Place your bets now. It's going to be $9.99 or $10.99. Come on, let's be honest.
With a free Doomsday comic as well, if you want it.
But it was a great thing to have, and for the kids, it was a nice seller for them, because a lot of the children did find it and got this, and it was a nice little thing. I remember at the time thinking, if somebody's gone home from work, popped into the newsagent on the way home, bought this for little son or daughter and given it to them there and then, how lovely was that? And it just took me back when I got the first Doctor Who weekly. Very, very sweet.
And it promotes, Doctor Who magazine. So if you've picked up this and want to find out more, then it directs you to get in Doctor Who magazine. And I'd love to know how many subscribers, and because I would have picked up Doctor Who magazine on a regular basis not long before that, and how many more the TV movie picked up in terms of readers and subscribers.
Yeah, it's interesting. But you could also say that movie special, well, it was the template again, just like the TV movie special was for the reboot of the show a few years later. But the TV movie special from Panini was the forerunner to Doctor Who Adventures, which started along 2006 and was aimed at a younger audience. And for a little while there was hugely successful with the kids, and also some of us older ones who were collecting it too, because you used to get a free gift in that every week, and they were camp. But yeah, I mean, it was all that sort of stuff. I actually saw the first when you saw Doctor Who Adventures all those years later. It reminded me very much of that, because it was done in very much the same style. It had the same style writing for it. It was big. It was colourful. It had loads of photographs. It was a lovely introduction. Of course, they had the advantage then of being able to move with the weekly episodes of the series, which the Doctor Who magazine said. But if you are a collector, it's a nice thing to have, and I hope you've still got it. And if not, try and source it for your collections. Wow. So we're coming to the end of the show now, and it's time for the WHOTASTIC panel, as well as you watching us, to take part in this. Yes, indeed. It is time for the scores on the TARDIS doors. I'm going to start with the Time Muddler. Out of 10, what are you giving it?
8.
Okay. Badria.
I will go a 9. I really love it, and it has great fond memories. I don't think it's perfect. That's why it's getting a 9 instead of a 10.
Fair enough. And then we'll go for Paul.
Can I have a little build up to this first? I'm going to say I love the TV movie, and it's got great memories for me. Like Badwea, I'm going to give it a 9.
Wow. John, what are you going to give this?
Well, unlike last week, I'm not going to get my big one out. I've got my little one out.
Okay.
Because I'm giving this 4.
A 4. All right.
And to be honest with you, that's been generous.
You've stole the words out of my mind, because from where I'm coming from, based on my original experience of this, as well as my partial rewatch the other day, which I just couldn't get through, my score on the TARDIS store for the TV movie is a very generous 5. Don't hate us for this. All opinions are valid here. Let's see what's happening in the comments. Who's giving what? Right. TARDIS Spider is giving it a 6 out of 10. Just Jordan, she's giving it an 8.5.
Yay.
Peter is also giving it 8 out of 10 with a happy memory. Woodhouse 122 is giving it a 6 out of 10. Thank you, Rory. Oh, Gary's saying 6 for quality, but 9 for nostalgia. And Jamie's saying, John, your TARDIS has shrunk.
It's the cold weather. It's the frozen north.
Jack Thursby, Jack, thank you for joining us. Lovely to see you. He's saying 5 out of 10 is about right. I know I knew Jack for a reason here. It's fantastic. So it's lovely. Keep your scores coming in. Put them into the comments if you're not watching us live. Goodness me, it's been a busy show. Coming up on Who's Views Reviews next time, we go to the second story of Tom Baker's first series. And we're going to be looking at Alien. Sorry, we're going to be looking at the Ark in Space. Hurrah! Yes, the parallels are there, and we're going to be talking about them. So please join us next time for the Ark in Space. Gentlemen, I hope you have enjoyed this TV movie review. We've gone on a real long time, just like the actual episode itself.
It's longer.
Actually, we went on longer than the movie did.
Oh, goodness me. I hope it's been a good show. Let's have a look. Oh, look, Peter's saying, oh, nice, the Ark in Space. Yes, do make sure you join us live next time round for that. I want to say thank you to all the Who viewers that were in the chat, to Peter, to Jack, to Jamie, to Gary, to Woodhouse122, to Just Jordan. Thank you for joining us. Lovely to see you. We've got Gary here. Lovely to see all of you. Thank you so much. And of course to Jamie. Goodness me, so many comments, so much activity. So look, we really do appreciate you all getting involved with us and giving your thoughts and memories. It's absolutely fantastic to see you. Peter's saying we got there in the end. Yes, you do. And Jack wants to know, when am I recovering from Doomsday? What are you talking about? I have no clue what Jack's talking about there. Do any of you lot? No, we don't. We'll move on from that.
I've heard of it.
So, from the WHOTASTIC panel, we will see you next time on Who's Views Reviews. And also, don't forget to make sure that you've rung that bell, because we are dropping more content through this. It's quite a busy schedule for us in here in August. And if you are around this coming Monday, what date is that, guys? This is the 7th, isn't it?
The 7th, yes.
Monday the 7th, here at 7 o'clock, hopefully, we will be doing a Doctor Who special, and we will be celebrating that unique and wonderful relationship between Doctor Who and that other British television legendary show, Blue Peter. We would like you, with your memories of Blue Peter, past and present, to get in touch. Come and join us for that very special live stream on Monday the 7th at 7 p.m. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us. And oh, look, Peter's now saying the cloister bell has rung, whatever that means. Yeah, I suppose so. And bye-bye from Gary. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. We will see you again next time here on Who's Views Reviews. Until then, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Oh, bye-bye, everyone. He sounds like Sooty and Sweet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.